In his late 20s, Benjamin Franklin began an experiment that would last the rest of his life. On himself. He built a system, a method for remaking his own character, week by week, fault by fault. He tracked his progress in a small notebook he carried everywhere. When the pages filled with marks and erasures, he transferred it to ivory tablets that could be wiped clean and reused. He kept those tablets in his pocket for over 50 years. He showed them to almost no one. But this was not a journal. It was not a diary. It was something stranger. A grid. 13 rows, 7 columns. And every night before he slept, Franklin opened it and marked his failures. The system worked. By his own account, it changed him. But it also revealed something he did not expect. Which parts of himself he could never fully fix. To understand why Franklin built this system, go back a decade. At 19, living in London, he wrote a short philosophical pamphlet. In it, he argued that because God was all-powerful and all good, everything that happened must be exactly what God intended. Pain, pleasure, virtue, vice, none of it mattered. By definition, whatever anyone did was right. It was clever logic. It also destroyed any reason to behave well. Franklin gave copies to friends. 2 of them promptly used his own argument to justify refusing to repay money they owed him. He burned the rest of the pamphlets. Years later, he called it one of the great errors of his youth. Not because the logic was necessarily wrong, but because it was useless. It did nothing to help anyone live better. That failure stuck with him. And when he returned to Philadelphia and began building his printing business, he started asking a different question. Not what is true about morality, but what is useful? Franklin made a list, 12 virtues at first, qualities he believed would make him more effective, more reliable, more at peace. Temperance, silence, order, resolution, frugality, industry, sincerity, justice, moderation, cleanliness, tranquility, chastity. Then a Quaker friend pulled him aside and informed him, bluntly, that he had a reputation for being prideful, overbearing, sometimes insolent. Franklin added a 13th virtue, humility. But a list was not enough. Franklin understood that wanting to change was not the same as changing. So he designed a method. He drew a grid in a small notebook. 13 rows, 1 for each virtue. 7 columns, 1 for each day of the week. Each week, he would focus on a single virtue. Every night, he would review his day. If he had violated any virtue, he marked it with a small black dot. The goal was to keep his focus row clean. 1 virtue per week, 13 weeks to complete 1 full cycle, 4 cycles per year. He did not try to master all 13 at once. He worked through them sequentially, like training separate muscles. I was surprised, he later wrote, to find myself so much fuller of faults than I had imagined. Some virtues came easier than others. Temperance, for instance, eating and drinking in moderation, required only discipline. frugality, and industry aligned with his work as a printer. Silence he practiced deliberately. He trained himself to ask questions instead of making assertions, to win arguments by seeming not to argue at all. But two virtues haunted him. The first was order. Franklin was, by his own admission, a disorganized man. He had an excellent memory and a restless mind, and he resented the time it took to put everything in its proper place. He kept trying, he kept failing. Eventually, he invented a rationalization. Perhaps being too orderly was itself a kind of vanity. The second was humility. He admitted, decades later, that he never truly acquired it. What he acquired instead was the appearance of humility, the discipline to avoid contradicting others directly, to phrase his opinions as questions, to let others feel they had reached his conclusions on their own. I cannot boast of much success in acquiring the reality of this virtue, he wrote, but I had a good deal with regard to the appearance of it. And then, with the dry wit that ran through everything he did, he added, "For even if I could conceive that I had completely overcome it, I would probably be proud of my humility." That nightly ritual, opening the notebook, reviewing the day, marking where he fell short, was not about punishment. It was about forcing a pause, a moment to ask, who was I today? Who do I intend to be tomorrow? Franklin repeated that small act of reflection thousands of times across 50 years. If you want a simple way to build a similar practice, daily reminders of who you're trying to become, there's an app called Affirmations, link in the description. Now here's what happened when Franklin got old. In his 70s, Franklin was the most famous American in the world. He was in Paris, negotiating the alliance that would win the revolution. French aristocrats adored him. Women kissed him on both cheeks. Philosophers quoted his experiments. And at dinner parties, when the conversation turned to how he had become who he was, Franklin would sometimes reach into his coat pocket and pull out a small object. The ivory tablets, the same grids, the same 13 virtues, still with him after half a century. One French admirer who touched them called them this precious booklet. Franklin had used the system so long that the tablets had become smooth from handling. The marks were long gone. But the structure remained, the weekly cycle, the nightly review, the quiet discipline of asking whether today had been better than yesterday. Late in life, Franklin told a story. A man goes to a blacksmith and asks to have his axe ground until the whole blade shines. The smith agrees, but the work is slow. The man must turn the grinding wheel himself while the smith holds the blade. After a while, the man grows tired. His arms ache. The blade is only partly polished. He stops and says, "I think I like a speckled axe best." Franklin used this story to explain his own failures at order. He could never get the whole blade to shine, so he learned to accept the speckled version of himself. But here is what the story does not say. The man still went to the smith. He still turned the wheel. He still tried. Franklin never stopped carrying those tablets. He never abandoned the system. He simply stopped believing he would ever finish the work. And maybe that was the real method all along. Not perfection, just the willingness to keep grinding.